Hi folks, good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. My name's Sean, aka Uncle Frogface, and welcome to today's video. If you're new here, then welcome. If you're not new, then welcome back. I am trying something today that I have only attempted once and only partially. That kind of doesn't make sense. Okay, let me get into it. So, I have been using Procreate for quite a while and I love it for drawing, I love it for painting, and I've tried animating in it once. And actually you guys see the result of that animation every time you watch one of my videos because it's the intro for my channel, the Uncle Frogface with the lily pads and the little sparklers. It's the only time I've ever done animation. But I've really wanted to try my hand at it again. And I know that Procreate has got so much better with animation and page assist and all these kinds of things. But it also has 3D capability now, in which you can import 3D objects and paint them. So I was wondering whether you could take a 3D object, paint it, and then animate it. Well, that's what I was going to attempt anyway. But I didn't just want any old object, I wanted to sculpt my own object. So falling back on another skill that I've not used for many years and I only kind of just got into, 3D sculpting. And I'm doing that using Nomad Sculpt for the iPad. And I was honestly really impressed with the software. So I'm doing this for Promptsquad. As you know, Promptsquad, we get together every month, a group of artists, we have a random prompt and we create a piece based around a prompt that's randomly generated from all of our ideas. This month's Promptsquad was Space Adventure. So, my idea is to animate a background and then in that background have a 3D spaceship also animated. And I don't know whether it's going to work. Well, I do because I'm filming this afterwards. But when I started this, didn't know whether it was going to work. But actually, it ended up being a really fun process. I've learned loads. And I'm going to take you along on that journey. So, I'm not going to turn the camera around because we're not going down. We're just going to go into some time lapses and I'll explain as we go. But, let's go into time lapses and I'll explain as we go. So, okay, let's start with the very base idea, and that is a spaceship flying through space. So, of course, the first thing we need is space. And this is just a painting in Procreate. This is nothing special at all. I'm just using some cloud brushes and just little dots of white and a little bit of orange and blue and yellow to give some variation to the stars. Once I had enough in, I flipped and skewed and duplicated what was already there. So, the two elements I want on the 2D animation, I want a planet that's floating in the background very slowly as if it's far away in the distance, and then I want some mist in the bottom as well, and I want that to be travelling at a different speed, and that will give kind of a parallaxing effect and make it feel like the ship is moving through space at speed. So those are my two elements. We've got the mist and we've got the planet. I'm just kind of messing around with some of the layers. So I'm going to animate each of these individually, starting with the planet. So actually it's very easy to do. All I'm doing each time is using the animation assist. I'm duplicating a frame, using the selection tool, clicking next to the planet 3 times, so I'm getting a consistent movement of pixels each time, and just moving it along. Now, the limitations of the amount of frames that you can have mean that I had to split this into 2 animations. But that gave us just under 12 seconds worth. The dust was a little bit more interesting. I had to double the width of the canvas, duplicate the dust over twice, so I've got a nice seamless texture. And then once I've moved it all over, so this is the planet's moving at 24 frames and the mist is moving at 12 frames, crop the image back, and then that's it. We've got the mist moving at a different pace. Sculpting, so this is my first time playing with Nomad Sculpt, and it was a very steep learning curve. The only 3D modelling I've done before is in Blender, and that has a lot of tools within it, and they're tools that I've really gotten used to, although it's been a long time since I've used them. And here we are with a completely different application, but I actually found using the primitives and then using the trim tool, I was able to get the basic shapes that I needed. I literally scratched the surface with the software. There is so much more that could be done. But as it was, this was a big learning curve for me. So I did what I could and what I was happy with. I could have pushed it a lot further, but I was, as I said, learning as I was going. One big thing I learned as I was going was how to reset the center of a scene. So you'll notice here as I'm bringing in new sections, they're off center, and that's because I'd moved the first piece off of the global center. So I needed to reset everything to the center of one piece, which I didn't figure out until much later. So one thing Nomad does very well is it allows you to bring in an image, and you can have that in your background and then use that as a scale. So this little sketch in the background is just a very quick doodle I made in Procreate again, and it is a very quick, very chalky doodle, and this is my base outline, and that will just stay there as it is. One other thing that I found Procreate that Nomad does very well is you can actually set camera scenes. So I was finding by this point I was moving things around and I was having to resize them, put them where I wanted them, moving things around, resize them, put them where I wanted them. And actually in the camera view at the top you can set a specific scene. So when you've got something lined up exactly where you want it, you can move it around as much as you want, and as soon as you click that camera, it's going to go exactly where it was. So I actually set up a side camera and a front camera so that I could flip between the two. So as I said, all of this is just using primitives. So far I've used a cone, a ball, and now I'm using some cubes, and I'm really flattening them down. And this is to have those kind of panel pieces in the back. And again, just putting them where I need them to be, thinking about any trims that I need to make on them, and also thinking about the width. So my idea for the animation is that the ship is going to come in kind of on a twisted angle and straighten up as it flies in, and then once it's straight, kind of wobble around a little bit and then zoom off at the end. So I'm thinking about the depth of each piece and the width of each piece of the ship, so that as it's moving in 3D space, it gives that a real sense of a three-dimensional object moving around. And of course you could do this completely in 2D animation. It would just take a lot of planning to be able to do. And still at this point I didn't even know whether what I was attempting was possible. I knew that I was going to have to look at PNG files because they have no backgrounds, or at least you can create them so there's no background there. And when it came to actually animating the ship, all I had in my head was this image of kind of doing stop motion animation frame by frame. So I'm already plotting out in my head where I'm going to move things around. Just a little bit of footage there, you can see I've got that circle on the side of that lens piece. But the whole front of the ship now is basically done, and we're on to the back part, this kind of engine housing, and exactly the same. I've got a cylinder, I'm trimming that down to the shape that I want it to be. I've now set the world center so everything can be symmetrical. We've got tubes connecting the two sections, and yeah, this is coming along really nicely. I'm nice and relaxed and just chilled out and doing this. And this was by no means a quick process, but I think with practice it could have been much quicker than it actually ended up being. But again, you know, that's the life of an artist and learning new softwares and new ways of doing things. And actually it's something I really enjoy. Like I actually really enjoy learning new things and trying things out and failing. I think there's a lot of reward in failure. I think people get far too hung up on making sure everything's perfect. You know what? Make things that are imperfect. Fail at something, you'll learn far more than you will making perfect things. And this by no means were perfect, but I really enjoyed how it turned out in the end. So you can, with these pieces, rotate them around, and it's by kind of holding on one of these rings and moving it around. But for some reason, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I'm sure it's just my lack of confidence and lack of experience with the software. But we get there in the end. I did notice that you kind of got these pivot points around, and if you hold some, you can move them just on the X or the Y or the Z axis. But yeah, we're coming close to the end of the actual sculpting piece here. I'd be really interested to know if any of you are into 3D sculpting, or whether you've tried 3D modeling, whether you've tried Nomad as well. So this was something that actually a few members of Promptsquad had been discussing, what would be the best 3D modeling software for an iPad. And actually we did a lot of research, and for me this is the one that I think was going to work the best, and I'm really pleased that I went for this one actually. I think it cost like £12.99 in the UK, which for a piece of software like this is really good value for money. And don't forget, I'm doing this on an iPad. I'm not doing this on this is an iPad. I mean, what? I remember when Procreate came out with being able to paint things in 3D on an iPad. That was phenomenal, but here I am sculpting something on an iPad. I never thought I'd be able to do this, and I'm honestly blown away, really, really blown away. The engines at the back, you can see that they're just cones that have been truncated and stacked up together, merged into a single object. You can change the resolution of pieces here as well by doing a voxel remeshing. And because I've done that, and because of the resolution that I was using to do my initial sculpts, I've now got these jagged edges around the edge and a few artifact bits where it's not quite sculpted properly. So I'm just going over and I'm filling them in. We've got nice clay brushes, smoothing brushes. There's a flatten brush, which I really, really like. You see I'm using it here just to flatten out some of the edges. But honestly, just a few minutes going over some of these bits that look slightly odd, or where the resolution is not exactly where I want it to be, and it looks so much better. These finishing touches really, really do make a difference. So at this point, I'm just playing around with a few bits, finishing up and considering the shape of the ship, and I really like what it is, but I kind of feel like it's missing something, and I can't quite pinpoint what it is, but the weight of the ship doesn't quite feel right. I tried kind of putting in some panels and some details, and no, that wasn't it. So I decided actually what I needed was to add an extra piece. So this was actually quite fun because I got to use a Taurus, and what I'm going to add are some wings, and I wanted these curved wings, so I'm just trying something out. This kind of felt like sketching, but sketching with 3D shapes. It reminds me a bit of Lego actually. God, that sounds really bad, but it honestly does. Like Minecraft reminds me of Lego as well. So I've got this shape here, wasn't happy with the end of the wings, so I'm trying to come in and kind of do something with them. It's starting to look a little bit too Klingon for me, so I'm again playing around, undoing things, and still not quite happy with it. So I undo a bunch and go back to this point and just round out the edges. There's a move brush up there, which means you can grab points or you can grab bits of the 3D mesh and you can just move them around and actually make some quite drastic movements. So I'm just squashing that out a bit. Didn't like the placement there, tried at the front, didn't like it there either, but here at the back this felt right. This felt like the weight of the ship was kind of real and cemented. So again, I've got it all in there. I'm just messing with the resolution and then saving it as a single 3D file. So here we are back in Procreate, and this is painting a 3D object in Procreate, and I just imported this as an OBJ file. So I exported it first from from Nomad and then imported it into Procreate, and I'm just able to go through and paint it like any other 3D object, and I'm using the same brushes as I would use to paint anything in Procreate. The good thing with this is that you can actually paint the materials that it's made out of as well. So I'm having a bit of a mess around with light, and you can see there we've got metallic and we've got roughness, and these differ on the grayscale that you paint them with. So messing around with these, I found that the glass section at the front there, I can make it really metallic and shiny. There's some other areas I wanted to make it nice and metallic as well. I knew that the flames that I wanted coming out of the back of the ship would be blue, so I'm putting a blue light source there. So then that saves me a whole bunch of painting because it's already there, it's done in 3D time. I'm just going through and detailing out little bits and kind of sectioning parts out and making them the right colour, doing some texturing work on them as well. There's a few areas where I wanted to add just small pops of detail. I mean, the ship's actually going to be fairly small in the animation, but I think that just these small bits really bring it together. And again, I'm playing around with the roughness and the smoothness and the metallic nature as well, and just generally having fun with this. I'm actually really liking the colour scheme as well, this orange and blue, and different shades of blue against the different shades of orange. This honestly took so much time. I kind of got lost in it. And speaking of lost, yeah, it didn't all go to plan. Okay, so it's at this point that I should probably point out that this has actually taken me hours to do. But honestly, could not have been possible if it wasn't for this tiny thing here, the pen tip. You know, I've talked about these before. There we go, this is my green pen tip. I've been doing this kind of through the night in bed, and that tap 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 would have definitely kept Andrew awake and I would have been shouted at, so this has been an absolute lifesaver. Anyway, back to the video. So after all of that painting in Procreate, this is the final model that we have. So now I'm thinking about that rotation that I want the object to have, and I'm actually coming in and taking snapshots. So I'm moving it, and each time I move it slightly, I'm exporting it as a PNG. So PNG means that it's got no background, but that means that I can import each of those pictures as a single frame on the animation, and it means that I should get a nice smooth twist to the ship, and then obviously I can place them where I want them to be, and you can see that that's what I'm doing now. And this really did feel like the stop motion animation documentaries that I was seeing, where you see those incredibly talented artists making minute adjustments and then taking a picture and then making another adjustment and taking a picture. It really did feel like that. But once I've got all of my frames in place, by the way, those artists are phenomenal, and they have a level of patience that I just don't have. But this is my kind of small attempt at that. So once I've got all of my keyframes in, I'm coming back and painting in the jet thrusters. And by hand painting these, it means that as the ship is coming in, because of the variation in the paint strokes, it will give like a rippling fire effect to that fire in the background. And I'm just going through frame by frame by frame. There we go, we're almost there. So with the movement of the ship in space, all I'm actually doing is taking the same frame for about 4 beats and repeating it, but just slightly moving the position of the ship each time, and it just gives it a little bit of movement in space even though it's in kind of a static position. Also, we need to add some speckles to the thruster at the back, so I'm just doing that, and it's basically a very small spray paint brush, and I'm just stamping and putting a few bits in. And there we go, you can see that small movement just gives it a little bit of life and stops it being so still and unrealistic. Unrealistic for a spaceship. Now this is the final piece of animation that I need before we can get everything wrapped up. So I want the ship to warp at the end. So I'm thinking about the movement of the ship as it's warping, and then the actual warp itself as 2 separate things. So I've got this kind of squishing of the ship, and I'm also putting an overlay on each of them of white and increasing the opacity of that each time so it becomes more white as it shrinks down. And then I want this ball of white light, and then for it to streak off to one side. And this was fairly simple to do. I've just got balls of different side and different opacity, so it starts off low opacity, becomes really opaque, and then low opacity again. Doing a similar thing with the beam as it grows, and then obviously we're kind of coming down to a point and then streaking off to the side. I had a lot of fun with this one, playing with the frames at the end to get the timing just slightly different. So we've got this nice consistent grow, and then whoosh, it shoots off to the side. Right, okay, moment of truth. So I've got all of the components ready to go. Now everything is going to be exported into DaVinci Resolve, which again is free software, and it's what I edit all of my videos on. Now interestingly, for the pieces that have transparent backgrounds, if you export them as animated PNGs, they don't work. But what you can do is export them as a PNG file, which then separates it into all of the individual images, and then select all of those images, drag them into DaVinci, and it automatically puts them in as an animated PNG. Took me a long while to figure that out, a lot of time wasted, but everything's coming together now. I need to do some music, sound effects, voiceover, but I think we're going to skip that part and we're going to go right to the animation. Are you ready? Okay, world premiere of Space Adventure in 3, 2, 1.
Looks like we lost them, Captain.
Great work, computer. Let's warp. I am so stupidly happy with this. Like, I could not be happy with it. I'm beaming, as you can see. I really enjoyed this. I've always loved animation and just kind of dipping my toe in. I used to make flick books. I suppose that counts as animation as well. This is my second ever animation in Procreate and my first ever time utilising 3D as well. I really want to know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Whilst you're there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. More of this content definitely coming. I think it might be time for me to redesign my channel intro. What do you guys think? Again, leave ideas down below. As always, I really hope you've enjoyed today's video, and until next time, goodbye.